Right, g'day everyone. Welcome to another week of Got the 4 Points, episode 17, bringing you another week of your local footy fix. It's a pretty weird week. It's interleague for some. Some people are having a week off. Some people are playing like there's no time off at all. There's been some really interesting results all around the state. We are very excited to bring them to you. And we also, Pete, had a pretty fun day yesterday. We actually got a chance to go somewhere different, watch a different local footy game, and we had a day out at the Riddle League. I feel like I've seen you very recently, but how you doing anyway?
Yeah, doing well, thank you. Well, it has been under 24 hours since we saw each other at the Riddle League. So Riddles Creek versus Kyneton. It's not often you and I get the opportunity to go out to a different match with our Blacks allegiance and work there, but double bye as we mentioned last episode for the Blacks. So yeah, we did have the opportunity to step out and watch some Riddle League football, which was good fun and a cracking day for it too. If you're ever gonna go watch football in the Macedon Ranges, that's the sort of day that
Mm.
you would be dreaming of because I can imagine it can get pretty nasty there at some points in the season. But no, it was a really good day. How'd you enjoy your trip out to the Macedon Ranges?
Yeah, it was great. It's a beautiful drive out there, and Riddles Creek's a lovely spot. And well, yeah, we were very excited for that game. It was top v second or top v third, I think it was.
Second v
Um,
third, I think.
Yeah, second v third. I totally know what I'm talking about. And no, it was quite competitive, especially up until about halfway through the third quarter when Riddle Bombers managed to pull away a little bit. Those that following on the Instagram would have seen we actually put some content out yesterday that was related to that game, which was a lot of fun. We really enjoyed sampling the canteen out there, or more specifically, the barbecue offering. So that was good fun. That's always one of the most fun things to do at the country footy. So we had a good time doing that, and yeah, I was pretty happy with the day all round. I thought it was good. You're right about the weather. It's thoroughly miserable in Melbourne today, wet and rainy and cold, but it's good footy weather. So there's definitely was a lot of teams making use of that good footy weather throughout the weekend. Um, just a reminder on the topic of Instagram, feel free to check us out there. Send us any tips, any updates. Send us any interesting stories. If you know someone who's approaching the ton or kicked a big bag of goals, let us know. Let us know if your side's having a game of particular interest. I know a lot of clubs were doing NAIDOC round Indigenous themes over the weekend, Pete. I did see quite a few on the Instagram with smoking ceremonies and welcome to countries and the like. And the Riddle Bombers were wearing what I thought was a cracking Indigenous jumper yesterday. Really beautiful red and black design. So yeah, let us know if you've got anything cool you'd like us to follow, and otherwise, feel free to check us out on either of the Spotify or YouTube platforms of your choice. Now, we're going to get into a bit of interesting news that's been happening and made quite a few headlines in local footy around the week in terms of clubs looking to move leagues. We're going to come to that a little bit later, but there's so many interesting games in terms of close results and broken losing streaks, Pete. Maybe we should get into a little bit of what caught our eye. Do you want to
Yeah,
lead us off?
yeah, definitely. And you're absolutely spot on that it was the week to break the drought for a lot of teams across a number of different leagues, which was really exciting to see. The first one that caught my eye, Rob, was Hill End in the Mid Gippsland League. Now, not only had they not won a game since round 12, 2024. They also broke the drought in spectacular fashion, given that it was their Carlton draft game. And we certainly know that the Carlton draft have been getting around with a number of players this season. I think we had Tom Hawkins out at Beaufort, if I'm not mistaken. Travis Cloak was out at Heathmere. We've had a few others somewhere else. I'm struggling to remember the others that were in that now, but Hill End had Will Schofield, the West Coast Eagles star, coming out of retirement to play for them. and it seems that he did the trick for them as they managed to defeat Stony Creek by 42 points. So pretty incredible result there. Will Schofield just probably slightly different from what some of the other Carlton draft players normally are. Normally you get the big bustling full forward or the really crafty midfielder entering into that. Will Schofield, as many will famously know, just the absolute no nonsense fullback that was basically charged with keeping the big forwards quiet. Um, but he did certainly play a little bit of time in the ruck for Hill End and actually managed to kick a little brilliant goal in the pocket. Just roved it, just took it out of the ruck, snapped it on the boot, and kicked a pretty incredible goal there. And from all reports, gave a pretty inspiring pre-game rev up as well. The great man. So, congratulations to Hill End. That puts them, as we had discussed in a previous podcast episode, to 8 points because you get 4 points for the bye in that league. So one of those confusing ones where when I went to look at the ladder today for the run sheet, I did have a little double take and go, oh, maybe it isn't their first win, but it is indeed still their first win. And I'm sure that the beers were flowing there in Hill End on the weekend.
What I want to know is where does Hill end and Valley start? That's
Not
what comes to
sure.
mind. Yeah. Very, very descriptive names down there, aren't they? You've got a Hill End and a Stony Creek. Just straight to the point. No,
Exactly.
no mucking around.
They're no nonsense people, the people in Gippsland. They just tell you what it is, give you a very accurate description.
And I reckon, just from the results that I've noticed, I reckon the Carlton draft might have gone win for win. I reckon that every single Carlton draft player has played in a win so far. I could be wrong there. I have to check it out, but I'm pretty sure that might be the case.
Yeah,
So
maybe. I felt like there was maybe one earlier, like Deledio or something, that maybe didn't play in
yeah,
a win, but not
okay.
sure. But they've definitely had more success this year in the Carlton draft than what they've maybe had in previous years, though.
Hmm. Yep, you might be right there. All right, Pete, I'm going to go over to the Hampden League now. The Hampden League down in southwestern Victoria is one that we've looked at occasionally. It's being touted by some in local footy media as one of the most even leagues in Victoria. We love to talk about some of our other favourite competitions, but I'm going to start noticing this one a little bit more. It's getting quite interesting down there in the Warrnambool area in the Hampden League. So on the weekend, the ladder leaders North Warrnambool were knocked off by Warrnambool Blues by a point. Warrnambool Blues sitting third, so still well and truly ensconced in the top four. 1 point margin there to the Blues. Luke Cody was the star there for Warrnambool Blues, kicking 6 goals. That's North Warrnambool's second loss for the season only, and the Blues are now in third. As I said, on equal points with South Warrnambool, who are the double reigning premiers. They had a bit of a surprise loss on the weekend, going down to Koroit. That's a pretty decent upset there by Koroit Saints for their fourth win in a row. So they're really hitting their straps. They've risen to fifth place on the ladder. Something that we'll need to do, Pete, as we dig deep into our investigations of these different leagues, is work out which ones have final fours, which ones have final fives, which ones have, I don't know if there's a final six, but anyway, all of these different systems. So when this team is slotted into fifth, I don't quite know whether that means they're in the
Mhm.
finals, but South Warrnambool, in any case, are now sitting 8-4. So a couple of good results there. Uh, Another notable upset was ninth place Cobden. So it's 10-team competition. Second bottom, ninth place Cobden Bombers staged another upset. They beat Terang Mortlake, who are sixth, by 32 points. Decent enough in itself. But looking through this league prompted me to notice that Cobden actually defeated South Warrnambool 2 weeks ago by 10 points. So at that point, it was ninth place beating second. And I think if you've got a scenario where second bottom can beat second by 10 points, you are really staking a claim to be one of the most even leagues in Victoria. So I'm pretty impressed with what's going on down there in the Hampton League. Seems like a good one to keep an eye on.
Yep, most definitely. Top five there in the Hampton League. So
Very good.
Koroit sitting there in fifth, but Terang Mortlake only one game behind them, and Camperdown only two games behind as well in
Yep.
seventh. So still a
Yep.
lot to play for there, still really close. So that's awesome to hear. Rob, I'm going to continue on with breaking droughts. And we mentioned that we were in the Riddle League on yesterday, and we watched Riddle Kyneton. And as you said, um, really close first half. Kyneton actually in front, and then Riddle just flexed their muscles and really got out on top, and probably saw the margin blow out to a result where if you're just looking at the end margin, you probably think the game was a bit easy, but we certainly know from being there it wasn't. Well, in the same league, Rob, Lancefield, 27 games without a win. They've finally got their win against the new team in the Gisborne Giants. It was a pretty decent win too. It was 33 points, so it wasn't just sneaking across the line. I did see a little bit of their social media work, the Lancefield Tigers there. I believe they're the Tigers as well, are they,
They are,
Lancefield?
yeah. Yep.
Which
Yeah, two
Kyneton
Richmond jumpers in
Tigers,
that league. Yep.
yeah, so always interesting. But a little bit of social media work there where they were talking about the parade that the boys had as they came back from their win, and I think they had footage up of maybe it looked like an old footage area of Liverpool's parade or whatever for winning the Premier League, and there were people standing on shops, and the streets were lined, and they said that was the Lancefield parade as they came back yesterday after the win. But yeah, credit to them there for that. That wasn't the only drought breaker, Rob, we had for the season. We also had the Benalla All Blacks. They are in the Ovens and King League from memory. They had their first win of the season. They only managed to sneak, I believe, one win last season as well. And quite a good win. Came back from 15 points down at three-quarter time. I'd like to have known what the address was at three-quarter time from the coach there at the Benalla All Blacks. At the aptly named Friendlies, I believe it's the Friendly Showground, which is just doesn't really instill fear into you, does it, as an opposition player? But they
No.
managed to get up and win by 3 points in the end. So managed to see off that 15-point deficit at three-quarter time, get the win. And I can imagine, just like it was at Hill End and just like it clearly was for Lancefield based off the social media, that the beers were absolutely flowing in Benalla on Saturday night.
Yeah, that I bet they were. I bet they were. Am I right in thinking they're the only All Blacks name in Victoria? Certainly
Look,
the only one I can think of.
they're the only one I can think of. I can't think of any others. It's probably quite a unique name, really, from a local
Yeah.
footy perspective.
Yep.
I can't think of them. There are two Benalla teams. The other one
Yeah.
is the Benalla Saints.
Yep.
In a different league, though, I believe the Benalla Saints. I don't believe they play in the same league. I'd have to double check that. I could just be,
No, they don't. No.
yeah.
Aren't
So
they in the Ovens and Murray?
no.
No. Oh, okay. Moving on. Uh, yeah, of course, we have the mighty Uni Blacks. We know all about them, but the All Blacks taking that famous rugby name.
Mm.
I did just do a little Google, and indeed, their jersey, you would be disappointed if anything other than, and they don't, other than sponsor logos. So, yep, crisp, clean, all
Right.
black.
So it's just all
Nice work,
black.
Benalla. Congratulations on that win. All black. Yep, yep. Even the numbers. No, no, not the numbers. Um, imagine that. All black. All right. I don't know. It must be getting late. I'm getting silly here. All right, Pete. Closer to home territory for us than Benalla. Pretty interesting day in the Maryborough Castlemaine League. My eyebrows were raised a little bit looking at some of the results there with leading pair Carisbrook and Talbot both going down on the weekend. Talbot lost to Harcourt by 39 points, and Harcourt's captain Tom Walters booted 5 goals in that win, so great effort by him. And Natty Bialaba beat Carisbrook by 29 points. So a bit of shuffling there in the Maryborough Castlemaine League. Now, my understanding, I haven't got the ladder right in front of me, but my belief is that Trentham having the bye on the weekend and the Maryborough Castlemaine League being one where you get points for the bye, Trentham have now hit the top of the ladder as a result of that extra 4 points. So it's still very close there at the top of the Maryborough Castlemaine League, but by virtue of not playing on the weekend, Trentham have taken over the mantle.
Yeah, I'm just not even going to comment on that
You're
because
shaking your head. For
not even
those, for
going to
those on
comment.
Spotify, Pete's shaking his head.
That's just dumb. But anyway, Rob, I'm gonna take us to a Metro League. I'm gonna take us to the Outer East Premier Division, and I'm taking us to Monbulk. And it was Monbulk Madness. They snatched a stunning 9-9-63 to 9-8-62 victory.
Now, just to clarify, is Monbulk Madness the name of the team? Because that's an unbelievable nickname.
It should be. It should be after the last couple of weeks they've had, Rob, because they claimed a stunning 1 point victory just 7 days after knocking off top of the ladder Wandon. So they have had 2 weeks in a row. So maybe they should change their nickname to Madness. But they also did that 1 point victory in absolute style, Rob. It was after the siren, the classic after the siren goal winner. Lachlan Beecroft takes a mark with they are actually known as the Hawks, Monbulk, not the Monbulk Madness, but that's okay.
Disappointing.
He takes a mark, trailing Upwey Tacoma by 5 points when the final siren sounds. Now there was a little bit of worry that he might not be right to take it. He had copped a pretty bad cork thigh, I believe it was, a little bit earlier that quarter. But smooth as silk and nerves of steel, left foot 30 meters out, just absolutely nails it. And the madness does ensue. And I just love this, Rob. I was reading an article about it today from where they interviewed the coach. And I just love this from the coach in that he mentioned, which I thought was quite an interesting fact. In the last 2 years, that's the 4th game they've had decided after the siren,
Wow.
which was crazy. And he said, we've lost 3 of them, and that's the first one we've won. So he said, it's nice to be on the right side this time. And he joked that he nearly thought about hiding behind the coach's box so he didn't have to watch as he took the shot. But when you've lost 3 of 3 in the last 2 years after the siren, which in itself is a feat. I can imagine the nerves were at an all-time high as the 4th one was on the line and they were having the shot. But credit there to Lachlan Beecroft, who got the job done, and that was a big win there for them, as I said, after knocking off the ladder leaders the week before. That puts them into 5th, which is pretty crucial. They're 2 points off 4th. 4th have had a draw, so hence why they're 2 points off 4th. They are a couple of games away from 3rd. So really a couple of wins that were needed, especially given Upwey Tacoma are one of the teams that are just underneath Monbulk. So big win there. And interestingly, that loss that they handed to Wandon was their first loss for the season as well. So a really big win. That was a 16-point win the week before. So well done there to the Hawks. Again, a little bit like what you said before, Rob. Not sure whether it's I can confirm it is a top 5. So they are 6 points away from Mount Evelyn in 6. So big win. Gives them a little bit of breathing room. Still a bit of the season to go, but certainly one that keeps them in the hunt there in the Outer East division, which, with that loss given to Wandon last week, is a league that is adding to the other leagues of every team having had a win and every team having had a loss. So I reckon with some of the drought breakers we've had this week, we might have a few more of those.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. Very good summary there. I wonder whether their other losses after the siren have been shots that they've missed or shots that other teams have kicked,
It's a great
because that
call.
that would be interesting to know. I was thinking when you said the coach wanted to not watch that it might have been a case of some shots that his team had missed in the past, but either way, nerve-wracking.
Mm.
But yes, well done to Monbolg. I'm going to bring us in, Pete, from the Outer East to the standard Inner Eastern Football League. Um, Berwick. Now, Berwick, apparently called the Wickers, which is one
Mm.
of those strange things where you don't actually pronounce the W in Berwick, but you do pronounce the W in Wickers. But anyhow, they had an absolute day out on the weekend. Uh, Possibly the upset of the season in perhaps all of suburban footy in Melbourne,
Ooh. Ooh.
maybe local footy altogether.
Ooh.
They were 1-9. Sorry, they were 2-9 coming into this game, third bottom, and they handed an upset to the previously undefeated East Ringwood by 6 points. So the scale of the upset here is more to do with the dominance of East Ringwood in the Eastern Footy League so far this season. It was an extremely nervy last few minutes for Berwick. They got out by as much as 20 points in the last quarter. They only ended up winning by 6. And the reporting I've seen around that win said that there were 3 gettable shots for East Ringwood quite late in that last quarter that
Mm.
went begging. So, but well done to Berwick all the same. Big
Yep.
upset. And crucially, Pete, that takes them to 3-9, a game
Mm.
clear of the relegation zone,
Yeah.
which
Wow.
they were in danger of prior to that. So big result there, and yet another
Mm.
indicator of a scenario where when you've got relegation on the line as well as finals, you maybe keep some of these games closer and
Yep.
more interesting, more to play for than you might otherwise do.
100%. There's not often dead games in promotion relegation leagues. That's a great find there, Rob. I haven't looked a lot into that league, so I can't comment on this accurately, but I wonder, East Ringwood having not lost a game, mentioning that some of their shots went begging in the last quarter. Is that just the difference of scoreboard pressure that they
Yeah,
maybe haven't had to face throughout the season? Again, don't know their other results, so they may have faced that pressure. But to me, it rings like it could be some of that scoreboard pressure that we know just makes good teams do funny things sometimes. Um,
absolutely. Yeah,
Rob, I'm going to continue on the drought breakers. I'm actually stealing one of yours here, mate.
no, go for it.
But it feels remiss of us to mention these drought breakers without mentioning in the Heathcote District Footy Netball League that Heathcote themselves get their first win of the year, beating Lockington Bemorm by 6 points. Dylan Johnston certainly helped them get over the line by kicking 8 goals. So that's absolutely incredible there for Heathcote. I wonder how many leagues we now have left where there isn't a team to have won a game. I'm familiar with at least two in the VAFA, two
Hmm.
divisions in the VAFA where that is true. But I wonder whether we're running short of leagues across Victoria where there's teams that haven't had a win. So I know we've looked at a lot of this, haven't we? We've asked
Mm,
people to look at where teams have had a win and haven't had a win. We've asked people to look at where teams are getting buys, points for
mm.
buys. Well, now maybe we need to start the hunt for leagues where no one's had a win and see what's left. But well done to Heathcote there. Yeah, really impressive to break their drought. And as we said at the top of the show, it's been a weekend for drought breaking.
Certainly has, yes. I mean, I can think of the Bendigo League and the Maryborough Castlemaine League as two that have teams without wins. But
Good, good point.
and I'm also pretty confident that the Geelong League is in that category too with Lara. I did have a little look at Lara's score on the weekend and quickly looked away.
Makes two of us.
So um, here we go, last one for me, and then we're going to get into some really interesting local footy politics. Another league I've been following reasonably closely because it's the subject of one of my paddock to premiership teams, the
Mm.
Loddon Valley League. I was quite surprised to open up the scores and see that Morong had a loss on the weekend. Now, Morong were sailing through the season undefeated. I think they got to 10 or 11 and zip. Um, Now, because of our episode last week with Andy Munro, where we had more of an interview style format and didn't go through what caught our eye, I hadn't picked up that this was actually Morong's second loss. So I was quite surprised by this. Now, Morong played Pyramid Hill and then Bridgewater and then Bears Lagoon Serpentine. Now, they knocked off Pyramid Hill quite convincingly. Sorry, there was another game in there that they played against a lower side that they won convincingly. But in their other challenges against top four sides, Bridgewater and Bears Lagoon Serpentine, Morong appear to have come unstuck.
Mm.
So they lost to Bridgewater last week by 29 points. Bridgewater are doing very well at the moment, as we will touch on in the paddock to premiership. They actually knocked off Pyramid Hill on the weekend and so have jumped to second place on the Loddon Valley League ladder. And then this week, Morong lost to Bears Lagoon Serpentine by 12 points. So a division that was looking like it was pretty set with Morong at the top, Pyramid Hill at second, and kind of the rest has suddenly evened up remarkably. Big shout out to Josh Mellington, ex-Fremantle player playing for Bears Lagoon Serpentine, who kicked 6 goals in that win. And kicking 6 snags in a 12-point win is a huge, huge contribution. Yep, tightening up very nicely
Mm.
there in the Loddon Valley League. And it's really nice to see in quite a few places that uh, there's a tightening up at the top and not one runaway champion that we have
Yeah.
sometimes seen in recent times in some of those local leagues.
Yeah, that's a really good pickup. You're right. With last week's episode interviewing Andy and his football journey, we didn't do our normal sort of looking of results. So that's a really good pickup. I wonder what's been behind this little bit of a slump that we're seeing from Morong. I know that in VAFA circles, we often talk about the European holidays. I can't imagine that that's a huge thing in country footy, but who knows? Maybe it's not European, but North Queensland trips away. Who
Bali.
knows? Bali, Bali, maybe Guam. But
I've heard it's nice this time of year. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
Guam's a lovely spot. Don't knock it till you tried it. But anyway, Rob, you did mention a little bit of footy politics. I think the last two, what caught our eyes, flow into each other. And what it is around teams looking to move leagues or enter leagues. And we've had a lot of this play out over the last period, especially off the back of June 30 being the deadline for clubs to indicate they wanted to move leagues. And now we're seeing a lot of that play out over the next month and probably will continue to see play out. Just a quick one. I know that we mentioned it a while back. This isn't what caught my eye, but Gisborne still, of course, making their play to join the Ballarat Footy League. I did find it interesting that I was reading some stuff throughout the week that the Ballarat Footy League, as recent as 2010 and twice before, had basically come to Gisborne asking Gisborne to join their league. And now it's the
Mm.
other way where Gisborne are knocking on the door saying, please let us in. And that's always an interesting one to me where it's like maybe Ballarat have somewhat moved on and continued developing and Gisborne are now at the door going, we maybe should have jumped in 2010, but foresight's a wonderful thing, isn't it? Um, so that's just one that's continuing on. It does look like the Bendigo Football League will knock that back, which I think will be really interesting to see how that plays out. Noting that we aren't even confirmed yet that the Ballarat Footy League clubs would accept it as well. But that's
Mm.
not the one that caught my eye, Rob. The one that caught my eye was one that's attached to the Bendigo Footy League, but in a different way, and it's the Maryborough Football Netball Club. So they did go into recess, Maryborough, for this season. The last season they did make an attempt to join the Maryborough League for season 2025. They failed in that bid, and just recently throughout the week, Rob, they made their second attempt to join the Maryborough Castlemaine District Football Netball League, and they failed, unfortunately, for a second time. So just want to take you through a few of these facts and figures before I get your take on it. So they need 75% of the votes to be confirmed in the league. Now, that is 13 clubs and 7 board members. Now, a change has been made since they applied last year. So when they applied last year, it was 75% of the votes again, but the only people that were allowed to vote were the clubs. This year, the Maryborough Castlemaine District Football League had a constitution change that included the 7 board members in that right to vote, meaning that instead of having to convince just 13 clubs, you also had to convince 7 board members of the need to join the league. So that's an important thing to note, I think. So they have failed a second time, but it's a very different vote potentially than what it was the first time, given that there's now 7 new people that get the
Mm.
opportunity to have their voice. Now, I couldn't find anything. I will put my hand up. I couldn't find anything that was written around why that constitutional move was made by the Maryborough League, whether they felt like the board needed to be able to have an impact and a say outside of just the clubs on what the future of the league needed. It could have been that. I don't profess to speak for knowing why that change was made. But clearly, when you're going from 13 votes to 20 votes, you now need only 5 clubs to say no, and you're out, or 5 people to say no as well. You could have all 13 clubs vote yes, and 5 of the 7 board members vote no, and you have not
Mm.
met the threshold or there. So, and look, I will add all of what I'm about to say next with a big allegedly, because this is just from the local footy rumor mill. I'm not saying that this is fact. This comes with the big alleged sticker so that I don't get in trouble. But the local rumblings, Rob, are one that there is one club in particular, and I profess to not knowing who that club is or who people are talking about. But there is a local rumbling that there is one club that has quite a few board members out of the 7. I'm hearing in my ear, at least 4 to 5 board members out of the 7 from the one club. And I'm hearing that that is probably a club that would have been leaning vote no. And so your assumption is that that club votes no as one vote. And if you have 5 board members from that club that all equally vote no on the basis of their club not wanting it, that's 6 votes, and that's dead in the water, regardless of what anyone else there is. Now, interestingly, voting is kept secret, which I'm absolutely fine with. I'm absolutely fine with voting being kept secret. But weirdly for me, I just find this weird. The percentage is also kept secret. So Maryborough have no understanding of if they missed out by 1 vote or if they only got 1 vote to come in. they have no indication of where they're at as to whether they go, do we have another crack at Maryborough? Or does Maryborough just not want us? And we are so far away from getting them to convince us to come in. To me, again, interested in your take once I get through this last little bit. But to me, that was a really interesting fact that I saw in what I was reading. Mainly because I think it's, I've said this on a few episodes, but it's one of the dumbest things I've heard. We're making clubs operate in the dark. It's, as someone that is a paid sports administrator, it's stupid. It's absolutely stupid. And it's a sign of people that do this as a volunteer job. And I get that. I love volunteers, and you and I volunteer for our club, but that's not good sports administration. I just want to add on that as a final piece before I get your take. This was the comment from the Maryborough Football Netball Club president, Glenn Bardsley. And make of this comment what you will as to what I've just mentioned in terms of some of the voting changes. But his comment was, we were set up to fail more or less. So the vibe there from Maryborough is that maybe some of these changes were made in a way to keep them from ever joining the Maryborough League. I did like there was another statement released by Maryborough just a couple of days ago indicating to their members and to their current players, not forgetting that, when we say Maryborough doesn't currently have an existence, they do actually still operate their junior football club that plays in the Bendigo Junior Footy League. So it's not like they've got no one there that is actually playing at the club. I did just like what they released recently, Rob, which was maybe just a little bit of a stick it up 'em type moment where it was a lengthy statement. I'm not reading out the whole statement. I'm reading out almost the very final sentence of that statement, which is, as our team song goes, we'll never weaken till the final siren's gone. So I thought that was maybe a little indication that Maryborough are not putting the cue in the rack just yet, and they're pretty keen to have another tilt at joining another league. What league that could be, we'll wait and find out. But it doesn't look like they're giving up just yet, Rob. So interested in your vibes and thoughts on the Maryborough situation as you've seen it play out from your perspective.
Well, my first thought there is, does that mean it's the club that's the Magpies that sing the Richmond song?
Probably.
I'm getting distracted by the unimportant facts here because this is clearly an interesting scenario, and a very sad one. I think there's probably not too much more to say. I think that's a good summary that you've read out there, um, and I think we're on a similar page here about wishing that there was a way to have that Maryborough team still involved in football somehow. I feel like a club with that much history. I don't remember the exact formation date, but it's 1870s or 1860s or something.
153 years old, I think.
Yeah, it's one of the oldest clubs in Australia, and the idea that they're not wanted seems pretty short-sighted to me from the other clubs. Um, there's been a lot of flux in football in Maryborough in recent times, and I do wonder if the Maryborough Magpies are a bit of a victim of large amounts of flux in the Maryborough Castlemaine League recently anyway.
I think so.
So Maryborough has gone from having um, Royal Park and Rovers and Maryborough Magpies to only Maryborough Giants
Hmm.
in terms of senior football.
Yep.
So that's really a lot of flux. There's also been quite a few clubs that have had successful years and then dropped quite a way down to the bottom and vice versa. There's clearly a lot of transition of players in that league. So maybe there's some people thinking that that's an indicator that the talent pool's just not there for Maryborough Magpies. But I still think it was worth a go, is still worth a go to
Yep.
have the Magpies enter that league. If it gets a few years down the line and all of the Maryborough clubs are really struggling, maybe it can be looked into. But I do think it's pretty disappointing that there is no senior football on Maryboro's premier ground, which is Princes Park. Beautiful football ground, one of the nicest in Victoria. And I absolutely agree with you that it is outrageous, actually, for the league, for the Maryborough Castlemaine League, not to release the percentage of votes obtained by Maryborough in that vote. Uh, it's just, yeah, I'm not a paid sports administrator, but it doesn't seem at all sensible or actually courteous.
Mm.
It, uh, treating the Maryborough Magpies like they are worthless, really, rather than a club with 153 years of history that is looking for a bit of a hand in a tough time.
Yeah,
Um, if the answer for practical purposes really is that none of the clubs want the Magpies in the league, they deserve to know that. They deserve to know that they should be looking elsewhere. Um,
agreed.
if the answer is if the answer is that they missed out by one vote,
Mm.
and there's a way that they can perhaps um, change their marketing strategy, change their approach to clubs, change their
Mm.
direction, change their pitch,
Yep,
that would get the vote over the line next year. They need to know that
agreed.
that's possible. I feel like there's the reality of clubs going into recess is that there's probably only one more crack for Maryborough Magpies in their current incarnation. It might already be too late,
Maybe.
but we also know that they uh, sounded out the Central Highlands League
Yep.
and received such a tepid response there that they didn't take the application any further.
Yeah.
Uh, I,
Which can I, if I just butt in there, which
mm,
I think is perfect. You know, they reached out to Central Highlands Footy League. The Central Highlands Footy League clubs gave an indication that there wasn't really a warm reception to that move, so they didn't waste their time entering into that league.
yeah,
This is probably the most frustrating part, as you mentioned, to not know how far away they are from this move with Maryborough. Is it a realistic chance or is it dead in the water? How are you
mm,
expected to make the next decision off the back of that? Like, clearly, someone knows. Someone's got to count the votes. Otherwise,
mm,
I mean, I mean, someone's clearly got to know what the percentage is, which just makes it even
yeah,
dumber because, clearly that's got to be the case. I mean, I'd just be arguing, maybe the Maryborough League should play their games on a different oval, and then both teams submit the score they got, and then that never gets released. And then at the end of the year, we just see who's in the top eight, and they play finals. Like, what a dumb league, dumb decision. I'm heated on this. Like, and maybe I'm going a little hard. It's maybe not necessarily a dumb decision, but I think there's a smart way you can go about this as a league where you give Maryborough all of the information, and then and when I say all of the information, I don't think you need to give them who's voted for what. That's fine. You
no,
don't
that's
you don't need that, but give them the genuine percentage as to where they're at, and they can make a decision moving forward as to do they have a third crack at Maryborough, or do they start to engage with other leagues? Like I have seen other leagues floated, like North Central, Heathcote, Loddon, leagues that clearly there's some challenges in terms of distance and travel there as well. But at the very least, if they know they're not within the chance of Maryborough, they can start to reach out and see what that's like. And I think the other thing I would say is, and the reason why I mentioned the Gisborne, where Gisborne's at the minute, is 2010, Ballarat reached out to Gisborne saying, join us. Gisborne
mm,
didn't. And now 15 years later, Gisborne are knocking on the door saying, can we join?
mm,
I think Maryborough is playing a dangerous game in terms of the league, the Maryborough District Castlemaine District Football Netball League, where you don't want in 5 years' time to be going, geez, can we get Maryborough back up and running? That would really help
mm,
us.
yeah.
It's a risky game to play.
Yep, I agree. And the final thing I would say that makes me really feel sorry for the Magpies here is that I feel like they've copped the rough end of the stick from the Bendigo Footy League as well. And that's where it's really, really doubly upsetting that
Yeah,
they've copped a raw deal where they were let go without a whimper.
Yeah.
It seems, given no support to maintain their stability in the Bendigo League, where they have been for about 25 years, I think.
Mm.
Really, no regard paid to the history of the club or the organisation at all from either of those leagues,
Yeah.
and that's disappointing and is not the kind of attitude or approach that's going to keep the game sustainable. It is an approach that's going to see clubs disappear, which is sad.
Yeah.
So, Pete, as well as having this news come out around June 30 in terms of Maryboroug's bid to join the Maryborough Castlemaine League, we had an interesting happening up in the northern part of the state where Ultima have been asking to change from the Golden Rivers Football Netball League to the Central Murray Football Netball League. So, just like the Maryborough story, we have covered this one before,
Yep.
but touching on it again because there has been some updates, and it is actually really interesting talking about this one directly after the Maryborough story because there's been a very different approach taken in this scenario. So I won't go into a huge amount of detail here, but as a quick recap, the Golden Rivers Football Netball League and the Central Murray Football Netball League are overseen by a body called the Central Rivers Association. And I guess that's a little bit like AFL Goldfields or something like
Yep.
that. It's this sort of subgroup. And so all of this traction that's happening from not just Ultima, there's lots of discussions here about viability of different clubs in various forms in this part of the state, or should I say two states, because this is, of course, encompassing some teams in southern New South Wales as well. Very large travel distances in this league. There has, in recent seasons, been some significant disparity in results, especially between the top clubs and the bottom clubs in the Golden Rivers League. And there have been a few teams that have left the Golden Rivers League as well. So Ultima, despite winning the premiership last year in the Golden Rivers League, had applied to leave that league and were knocked back. They've reapplied for the same thing this year to jump out of the Golden Rivers League and go into the Central Murray League. Um, Now, Pete, it seems like the story this week is that the bid to join the Central Murray Football Netball League by Ultima has been endorsed by the Central Rivers Overarching Board. So that's, I guess, exciting for Ultima. They look like they're getting somewhere. However, the endorsement is a little bit controversial because the Central Rivers Board actually decided to remove the rights of the clubs to vote on that particular endorsement. That means that clubs who had previously voted against or even for
Mm.
Ultima's move were now voiceless. Very much the opposite of what's happened in the Maryborough Castlemaine League, where not only is there a second vote and an unknown percentage of numbers, but more votes have been added to the tally that the Maryborough Magpies needed to win in order to get across the line. In this case, the overarching body, Central Rivers, has stepped in and said, no, we believe this is the right thing. We believe that Ultima should be taken seriously in a desire to change leagues. And for the health of the game in this region, we're going to endorse this bid. The endorsement of the bid is not a finalisation of Ultima's move because the next step will be for that decision to go to AFL Victoria. So Ultima is not confirmed as moving yet, but it's certainly a big hurdle that they've overcome by the removal of these votes of the other clubs. Now, when voting took place this time last year, 75% club support was required, just as in the Maryborough Castlemaine League. But that was 75% club support required in both leagues, in Central Murray League and Golden Rivers League. We know the percentages in this case, and we know the result, and we know that the Central Murray League supported Ultima's move. So 75% at least of the clubs in the Central Murray League were happy for Ultima to move over to their league, despite Ultima being the strongest team in the Golden Rivers League
Mhm.
at that time. However, the Golden Rivers Football Netball League did not reach the 75% threshold needed for Ultima to move. Now, that's perhaps a little less surprising, Pete, because this is quite a small league, only 6 clubs, and there's definitely some valid concerns from other Golden Rivers Football Netball League clubs
Yep.
that if they lose another team and they drop down to only 5 in a region where travel times between the 5 remaining clubs would still be very, very large, and you would be left with a situation if we were to go on this year's ladder where there would be one very strong team, which would be Hay, and the remaining clubs that would be a fair way back in the pecking order there. You can see why there's a little bit of concern. Now, the concern I would say in the reporting that I've read from Golden Rivers Club presidents actually borders on anger. And it seems to be directed around a sense that the overarching Central Rivers body seems inclined to take the decision on the existence at all of the Golden Rivers League out of the club's hands. This is where it gets challenging because the Golden Rivers League is so small. There is a perception that the very viability of the Golden Rivers League at all is under threat if
Yep.
Ultima are to leave. And so club presidents of the other clubs in the Golden Rivers League feel like they have had the chance to speak not only for their own club, but for the viability of their entire league taken out of their hands. Very interested to get your take on this. I think it's very tricky to know what the right course of action is here. I think my gut feel is that I'm impressed with a decision to make a decision and to be transparent about the decision on behalf of the Central Rivers Board. I think that's good. But I can see that in a scenario where endorsing this decision could pose a direct threat to the survival of that entire league, I can see why that's causing some heat under the collar.
Yep.
What do you reckon? What's your take?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing that I notice in terms of what we've just discussed with Maryborough and what we're now discussing with Ultima is a couple of things. Firstly, lo and behold, percentages can be provided.
Mm-hmm.
You can know where you're at. Holy hell, that's incredible. They might need to get Central Rivers down there to Maryborough and Castlemaine and hand them a calculator and show them what a percentage is. So we know that 75% approved it from the Central Murray clubs. We know that 17% were in approval in the Golden Rivers in 2024. So we know that 83% were against the move from the Golden Rivers for Ultima in 2024. So we know that. So immediately we know that clearly the Golden Rivers clubs are a long way away from ever voting Ultima out of their league to allow them to join Central Murray. And I can only imagine that what that's then done is throughout the course of the that period till maybe only about a month ago, where in another episode we went through the report that has been released around the future of the Central Rivers area. Um, I can only imagine that the Central Rivers body looked at the percentages from last year and looked at their strategy and report as to what this area requires moving forward and actually felt that those numbers probably weren't going to change in terms of what they got in
Mm,
2024. And so we actually need to come in as the overarching body and make the decision that we feel is the best for football moving forward. Which,
mm,
there's some challenges that I will talk through, but bravo. Like
mm,
that is strong leadership, and that is leadership that I think country footy needs. To
mm,
leave it up to the clubs is just fraught with danger where clubs are looking at self-interest and backyard. Now, in saying so, that's probably the two big differences I see into how this one's been handled for Ultima compared to the Maryborough one in the Maryborough Castlemaine Footy League. There's a bit more transparency. Now, don't get me wrong, that there's a bit more transparency plus, but also still, Central Rivers have come in and said we're taking the decision out of your hands, and I get
Mm,
that. I
mm,
get some might argue that what's their right to do that,
mm.
but I think from what you're saying, so I now get that would leave, and correct me if I'm wrong, is it 4 clubs or 5 clubs in the
It would
Golden
leave
Rivers?
5.
So it would leave 5 clubs there. If you read that strategy in the report, their recommendation from that is that the Golden Rivers League doesn't exist moving into the future, and that these teams actually filter into different leagues. There's indications within the report that some are saying that some might also end up in the Central Murray League. But there's also
Mm,
indications that there are other leagues around that they believe they could transition to. I think that's
mm,
an important element of this because
mm,
they've come in and made a decision on the basis of Ultima, but I think they've also made that decision on the basis of what they think is needed moving forward for football in this region.
mm,
And I think they know that there was absolutely no way that the strategy that they have developed would ever come to fruition if left to the devices of the club. So I think that's an
mm,
important element as well, is there's actually a strategy backing what the future of this league is. And
mm,
honestly, I think it's something that more like bodies like AFL Goldfields, AFL Central Rivers, AFL Barwon, even
mm,
though I'm sure things are going semi decent there in AFL Barwon with the population of Geelong. Um, I think these studies are so much more required to back what does this league. I I would have I'd still be sad and disappointed, but I would have a little bit less anger for the Maryborough decision if Maryborough Castlemaine District Football League and AFL Goldfields came out and went, look, the reason why we've rejected it is because this is the strategy we're working towards in this league, and this is the future
mm,
we see. And unfortunately, that
mm,
future doesn't have Maryborough within it because of A, B, C. But yeah, they're not pointing to anything. I think at least in this regard, Central Rivers are pointing to something
mm,
as to why and what that's about. And I think that's a really important element when it comes back to it. So I certainly think that that's something that needs to be taken into consideration. I do, yeah, I certainly understand that now maybe creates some challenges for the 5 that are looking likely to be left in the Golden Rivers. Um, but if the argument has been, or the strategy has sort of shown that Golden Rivers League is somewhat unsustainable, even with Ultimate in it,
mm,
I also look at it and go, why haven't the clubs been ready for this sort of discussion already? Like it feels like maybe they've been a little bit behind the 8 ball and sort of now that this decision's been taken out of their hands, it is now crap. We need to actually think about our future and where we're going
mm,
and
mm.
what that means. So look, it's a challenging one. And I don't profess to say that how Central Rivers have done it is the absolute perfect way. And I'd love to hear more from some of those other clubs, but uh, to me, I think it's about as good as you can get. You're never going to make a decision that everyone's happy with. That's the
Mm,
first. That's
mm,
the first thing you learn in. Well, I was going to say in the sports industry is probably for the first thing you learn in life is you never make a decision that's wholly popular. Um, but certainly, I think credit to Central Rivers for making a decision that I think is quite bold, and I think has been made off the back of we think this is the best for our area for football moving forward. We'll wait and see, rightly or wrongly, where it lands. But I was pretty impressed, in all honesty.
So you're saying it's better to have a plan?
Yeah, yeah. Funnily enough, I'm saying it's better to have something that you're working towards than clearly what some football leagues have got. And well, yeah, I've been quite critical there of Maryborough Castlemaine. They're not the only league in that boat. I think you could definitely accuse leagues of like Bendigo being in a similar boat. I think you could probably even accuse leagues that are doing quite well of being in that
Yeah.
boat. And the I think one of the mistakes that you can often make is things are going well. We don't need to look at what the future looks like. Um,
Mm,
that's great until things start going pear-shaped. And
mm.
then you might find that you don't have something that's structuring your decision making for the future. So, yeah, I'm kind of saying that a plan's pretty handy.
Yeah, I think a plan is very handy. I think a clear understanding of who is in charge of what as well may be lacking in some parts
Yep.
of football in Victoria. This is not an area that I know enough about,
Mm.
but I'm doing enough reading in this area now through covering these different leagues with you, Pete, to kind of get a sense that what's happening up there with Central Rivers and their oversight and strategy for that region is a bit different
Mm.
to what's happening in many other parts of the state.
Yep.
So if we're to equate Central Rivers Football Board or whatever their technical name is with AFL Goldfields, where are AFL Goldfields in the Maryborough decision making? So that's I I could be wrong in thinking that they have a role, but I'd be surprised.
Mm.
And if they don't have a role, maybe they should.
I think
So, mm,
historically a lot of them don't have roles because at the end of the day, a lot of this are, they're incorporated associations, and so they
mm,
legally have their own right to vote. But I think
mm,
to the point you just made at the end of your of what you're saying, I think that needs to change for
mm,
us to have any logical action moving forward. And clearly, in the Central Rivers case, it has changed because they
mm,
have come in and done it. And so I
mm.
think it's a lesson for other bodies of, if I'm an AFL Goldfields, I'm looking at that going, well, maybe we need to get involved in what's happening in Maryborough. Um, yeah, interesting.
Well, speaking of having a plan, Pete, we have a plan to finish off the episode with our paddock to premiership picks. That's a very interesting discussion, and we will continue bringing news to you. If we hear any more from Maryborough, from Maryborough Castlemaine District Football Netball League, uh, and uh, and also from the Central Rivers region. And in the meantime, I really just feel for all of those footballers and netballers out there who are in flux and
Mhm.
uh, waiting on decisions from whichever organisation it is that is in charge or thinks it's in charge. Or yeah, it's at the end of the day, let's not forget those guys and gals that are kind of being held up here, and not, in the case of Maryborough, being given any accountability about their situation or transparent. Excuse me, their transparency is really lacking.
Yep.
So let's hope that things can be sorted out. But yeah, let's get on to our paddock to premierships. It's been a reasonably quiet week, Pete. I'll give you my first one. I only had two teams playing because Fitzroy and Old Trinity and the Vafa were off this week for the Interleague. Um, Fitzroy are going to play Old Camberwell next week, and Old Trinity have got Carey. But Coringal, my pick down in Mornington Peninsula League, were playing the top side, Frankston Bombers, undefeated Frankston Bombers. They lost by 84 points, but to be fair, I think that's a reasonably respectable result for Coringal Bulls. They kicked 6 goals, one against the top team. They've certainly lost games this season by a lot more, Coringal, and Frankston have won games by a lot more.
Mhm.
So, not a bad effort there from the Bulls.
No, definitely. I was really impressed to see that result. I was off the back of last week's paddock to premiership. I was really worried around what that result could be. So I think that's actually a really encouraging result. Well, Rob, I had even less than you. I had the one team play this week. I had Tooleybuck Manangatang had the bye. They play Lake Boga next weekend. They Lake Boga is the team just underneath them on the ladder, so big game. Monash Blues, no game interleague. They come up against second on the ladder Q this
Mm.
week. And Castlemaine, no game into league. They played the VAFA Prem Beta Div 1 team. So Gisborne upcoming for them. So the one team that I did have play in the Ovens and Murray League was the North Albury Hoppers. They lose to Lavington by 8 points. I think I mentioned in last week's episode it's a topsy-turvy league. A win could put them to second, a loss could put them to fifth. They now sit in fifth off the back of that. Just in finals, it is a top five league. Things were going quite well, but they let Lavington kick 5-1 in the premiership quarter. And just couldn't reel that back in the last quarter. They looked like they got terms back a little bit in the last quarter, but just had let the game slip at in that premiership quarter. In better news, one half of the Joshua twins was back with Josh Murphy back and kicking 3 goals. So immediately his presence has impacted. Hopefully Joshua Minogue is back in the team at some point. They do come up against the Wodonga Raiders this week, who are bottom of the ladder. Need a big win. Just after dropping a one to Albury when they were up by 4 goals late, and now dropping one to Lavington that they rightly had chances. They just need to get on the winners list again and remember what that's like. I'm still got belief. There's still hope in this Hoppers season left, but I think they really need to get a few wins on the board to make sure they can finish at least second or third. Because with how competitive this league is, I think it would be a hard one to come from fourth or fifth in the elimination final and run the gauntlet against teams that have shown to be very good all season. Lavington, Myrtleford, Wangaratta Rovers,
Mm.
Wangaratta Magpies. Along with the Hoppers, all 5 of those teams have been really, really good at their own times. I can't see you running through, those teams one after the other for 4 weeks in a row. So I think you got to finish first, second, or third to win the premiership in the Ovens and Murray this year.
Well, sounds like they need to get on their bike then, or on the hop or something. All right. So my other Paddock Premiership team that played on the weekend was Pyramid Hill. Now, Pyramid Hill have succumbed to the rampaging Bridgewater, as I did touch on earlier in the episode. So 56-point loss, Pete. The margin to Bridgewater there got pretty big at the end of that game. So with that surprising loss, although maybe it's not so surprising given that Bridgewater had beaten Morong the week before,
Mm.
uh, Pyramid Hill have dropped to third on the ladder, 10-3. That's their third loss for the year, so one to Bridgewater and lost both games against Morong. Um, Look, it's not doom and gloom by any means. They're still very much in the hunt there. Bridgewater clearly having a purple patch. And if there was a positive to take out of this period, even though Pyramid Hill lost, it is that Morong have also lost. And so maybe the tightening up at the top of the table there means that if the Bulldogs can find some form, that Morong might actually be gettable come finals time. So
Yep.
I'm trying to find a positive spin on the situation there for Pyramid Hill. They've suffered a surprise loss, but maybe it's just a sign that the whole competition's tightening up and they're not as far behind the ladder leaders as you would think. Or maybe Bridgewater have really hit their straps and maybe they'll turn out to be the team to beat come the end of the year.
Maybe
Looking quite interesting.
the mean machine, Bridgewater.
Is that right?
It's what they're known as, the mean machine.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
so
Oh well, they're
maybe, yeah,
pretty
maybe
mean
they're getting
against
mean.
Pyramid Hill. Yeah.
Maybe they're getting into their mean period. So,
Yeah, yeah.
um,
Maybe.
we'll wait and see.
Maybe. It's been a bit lean and now it's turning mean. Anyway, that's about all we've got time for this week. Thanks for sticking with us for a pretty wide-ranging discussion there on some of the politics, and let us know what you think. If you've got thoughts on how things should be handled in the Maryborough Castlemaine League, what would you do if you had the opportunity to have your hands on the reins?
Yep.
If you have an opinion on which way you would have voted, let us know. We're pretty intrigued with these stories, and
Or if you have the percentages, let us
or
know.
if you've got the calculator in front of you, if there's a leak, if there's a source that wants to give us the votes, we'll very happily publicise them because we think they should be out there for all to see, and most particularly for the Maryborough Magpies to see because they deserve it, Pete.
Yeah,
They deserve to be treated with a little more respect.
agreed.
Thanks for staying with us, folks. Have a great week. If you've still got your side with a bye, we hope you get away for a nice mid-winter break. Maybe you're getting up to the snow or over to Europe or something. If your team's playing on the weekend, we hope they get the 4 points. If you've got interleague on, get down and support the players as they are rolling out for their respective leagues. I think we should have a little look at interleague at some point, Pete, maybe
Agreed.
next week.
Yep.
But otherwise, yeah, have a great week, and we will see you for another episode of Got the 4 Points next week.